Hard work is not failing you. You are failing hard work by using it as your only tool. Every morning you wake up and trade hours for money. You are running a financial system so fragile that one missed week dissolves everything you built. Solomon saw this trap 3,000 years ago. He did not point to a king, a general, or a wealthy merchant as your teacher. He pointed to an ant. And tonight, before this ends, there is a prayer waiting for you. One that has the power to rewire how you see time, capital, and the life God actually designed for you. Picture this. Alarm goes off at 5:53 in the morning. You are not even fully conscious yet, but the math is already running. Rent is due Thursday. The car needs oil. You worked 48 hours last week, and the account looks exactly the same as it did 2 Mondays ago. Nobody told you this was going to happen when they handed you that offer letter. You followed the rules, you showed up, you stayed late. And somewhere along the way, without anyone announcing it, the paycheck stopped being a reward and started functioning more like a leash, kept just long enough that you never feel the wall at the end of it. Proverbs chapter 24:34 describes what happens next. So shall your poverty come as one that traveleth, and your want as an armed man, a traveler, patient, unhurried, walking straight toward the house of the person who built nothing to stop it. 40 hours of motion a week, year after year, compounding into the same place you started. While the years go somewhere you cannot get back. Here is a question worth sitting with tonight. If your employer stopped paying you for 60 days, what collapses first in your life? Whatever just came to mind, that is the actual ground you are standing on. Solomon watched the ant and found something that sounds minor until you slow down long enough to feel the weight of it. Proverbs chapter 6:7 says, "The ant has no commander, no overseer, no ruler. Nobody is threatening it with consequences. Nobody is reviewing its performance at the end of the quarter. The ant stores because it has already internalized something about time that most people spend an entire career pushing away, that the current season will not last, and the only rational response to abundance is to put some of it somewhere it can survive without you." Ecclesiastes chapter 4.6 lands the diagnosis plainly. Better one handful with tranquility than 2 handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. 2 handfuls completely full, working harder than everyone in the room, and still ending up with wind. Nothing that compounds, nothing that outlasts the effort. Just the sensation of being busy, which we have somehow convinced ourselves is the same thing as building a future. Proverbs chapter 13:7 says, "There is one who makes himself rich, yet has nothing, and one who makes himself poor, yet has great treasure." The mandate was never about looking like you had arrived somewhere. It was always about the kind of freedom that does not disappear when the employer changes direction. Those are 2 completely different journeys. And right now, a lot of people are sprinting hard down the wrong one and calling it ambition. If that landed somewhere real tonight, drop in the comments where in the world you are watching from. Something genuinely happens when people waking up to the same thing find each other at the same moment. Here is what actually happened with Solomon, because the biography reshapes everything else in this lesson. He did not walk into a finished empire. He inherited a kingdom mid-construction, surrounded by nations watching closely to see whether the new king would hold or fold under pressure. And then God appeared to him. 1 Kings chapter 3:5-13, and simply said, "Ask for anything." Solomon did not ask for gold or military advantage or longer life. He asked for wisdom to govern well, to be able to tell the difference between what was right and what only looked right. And God gave him the gold on top of the wisdom, almost as an afterthought. That sequence deserves more attention than most people give it. Wisdom moved first, and everything else followed in its wake. You do not run after capital. You develop the kind of discernment that capital is naturally drawn toward, and then you build structures that hold it. At the height of his reign, 1 Kings chapter 10:14 records his annual income at 666 talents of gold, before trade revenue, before tribute from foreign kings, before the commercial infrastructure he had engineered across shipping routes in agricultural territories spanning multiple nations. He generated that not by outworking every other ruler on earth, but by constructing systems that kept producing while he was governing, thinking, writing, and resting. Charlie Munger spent decades reducing financial error to its actual source. And his method was inversion. Before asking how to get wealthy, he would ask what reliably produces poverty and then remove those things with precision. When you run that analysis honestly, the assumption that more hours automatically produce more capital ranks near the top. Effort that never gets translated into a self-sustaining structure just evaporates with the season. It buys some comfort and leaves nothing behind that works when you stop working. Think about what that looks like in a real week. A second job, 70 hours total, paying down a debt that came from buying something that no longer gets used. All that output going backward. Proverbs chapter 23:4 puts it directly. Do not wear yourself out to get rich. Do not trust your own cleverness. The cleverness Solomon is diagnosing there is the specific belief that your personal output is the engine of your financial life. Seeing that belief clearly without defending it is the incision that makes every other change possible. If this is landing for you, give this video a like right now. It tells us to keep building on these foundations. There are 2 seasons in every financial life, and most people only fully inhabit one of them, then spend years trying to understand why everything keeps resetting back to zero. Summer is when income flows. Job is stable. Contracts are active. Nothing is visibly breaking down. And in summer, the instinct most people follow without questioning is to let the lifestyle expand to match whatever the income happens to be at that moment. Better apartment, better car, better version of most things, because it genuinely feels like the point of all that effort. And then something shifts, a layoff, a medical situation, a company that quietly decides it no longer needs the specific role you have been filling, and what felt like a solid structure comes down fast because it was built entirely on the assumption that the current season had no end date. Proverbs chapter 30-25 makes a careful observation about the ant. A people not strong, yet they store up their food in the summer. The ant survives winter through temporal intelligence, reading the current season correctly and preparing during abundance rather than consuming into it. Physical superiority has nothing to do with it. The system does. Now here is something Jesus said that most people do not naturally connect to the way they manage their own financial life. In the parable of the talents, Matthew chapter 25:14-30, the master returns and does not congratulate the servant who preserved the capital untouched. He calls him wicked and lazy in verse 26. The condemnation is aimed specifically at someone who took what was entrusted to him, buried it in the ground out of fear, and brought it back unchanged. The master called that a waste. The servants who doubled what they received, one starting with 5 talents, one with 2, were both welcomed into joy. And the reason had nothing to do with the size of the outcome. It had everything to do with the fact that they understood provision placed into motion is something categorically different from provision placed into hiding. So what do you actually do with that tonight? An honest inventory of your current season is the starting place. What is generating income for you right now that might not exist in 2 years? That surplus is seed. In Proverbs chapter 11, verse 26 says, the blessing falls on the one who circulates it, who puts it back into something that generates more. Your first asset does not need to be large or impressive. It needs to exist outside the hours you are selling. There is a story the corporate world tells with remarkable consistency, and it sounds like wisdom. So most people absorb it without ever stopping to examine it. The story is that a steady paycheck means you are secure, and after years of receiving it on the same day every 2 weeks, the nervous system starts to agree, starts to treat the routine deposit as evidence that everything is fine and nothing urgently needs to change. At some point, and this happens slowly, without any announcement, the job stops being a tool you are using and starts being something you are dependent on to feel stable. The predictability of it trains the mind to stop seriously looking for alternatives. Every time you think about building something on the side, something that could function without your hours attached to it, the discomfort of that uncertainty fires and the instinct pulls back toward the familiar rhythm, and another year quietly passes. Paul addressed something underneath all of this in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 8. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. He is pointing at the anxiety that drives people to consume things they cannot genuinely afford. The need to look like the effort is paying off. to signal to the people around them that they have arrived somewhere worth arriving, to feel successful before they have actually built anything that produces freedom. When that anxiety is driving the decisions, money flows toward the image before it ever has a chance to go into a system. Augustine of Hippo called this disordered love. His principle of ordo amoris, the right ordering of what the heart actually values. His argument was that when we love things in the wrong sequence, the damage shows up in the structure of our decisions, not only in our character. A person who has placed the appearance of wealth above the reality of freedom will keep choosing the symbol over the seed in decision after decision, often without consciously realizing that is what they are doing. The reordering Augustine described is an interior process first, getting clear on what you actually love and whether those things deserve the place you have given them. And then the financial decisions begin to shift on their own because the source of the decisions has changed. When that reordering takes hold, Proverbs chapter 21 verse 5 begins doing its quiet work. The plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. A patient system running in the background, accumulating while you rest. That is the ant's final and deepest principle. Building something that keeps working after you have stopped, so that your rest is not a pause in production, but a proof that the system is functioning the way it was designed to. Tonight you are going to do one specific thing, not next week, not when the schedule finally settles down. Tonight. Charlie Munger described the financial turning point in terms that had no sentimentality attached to them. Save until it hurts. Live beneath what you earn. Invest what is left. Because the first meaningful accumulation is the hardest thing you will ever build. And once it exists, capital compounds at a rate that personal effort alone never reaches and never could. He was describing the exact moment the ant system crosses from theory into something self-sustaining. The moment what you stored in summer begins generating more summer on its own without requiring you to show up for it every single day. This is the architecture Solomon spent his life describing, what the ant demonstrates with its entire existence, what the parable of the talents encoded into a story that cannot be misread once you have genuinely seen it, what Augustine identified as the interior condition that makes all of it possible in the first place. None of them arrived at the same conclusion by coincidence. The structure is real in the same way that a load-bearing wall is real. It either holds the building or it does not, and no amount of additional effort compensates for a missing foundation. So, here is your 60 minutes. Tonight, open a blank page and begin mapping your first income source that does not require your time to be present for it to function. It does not need to be generating anything yet. It only needs to exist as a clear intention with a direction attached to it. That hour is the ant beginning to gather before the season changes. If this channel is building something in you, if these principles feel less like inspiration and more like a blueprint you have been looking for without knowing what to call it, subscribe now. There is more coming, and every lesson adds another layer to the system you are building. Now, if you can close your eyes, go ahead and close them. If you are driving or moving and cannot, just align your thoughts with mine right now. Set down whatever you have been calculating. Set down the weight of the effort that has not yet turned into the freedom you were promised it would produce. And let us bring this before God together. Lord, I come before you with open hands and an honest account of where I actually am right now. I have spent a long time confusing motion with progress, pouring effort into directions that were never going to accumulate into the life you placed in me. Tonight, I am asking you for the wisdom of the ant, the kind that does not need a supervisor to begin preparing, the kind that reads the season correctly and acts before the urgency arrives. Give me the courage to start cutting what keeps me emotionally tied to the next deposit. Give me eyes to recognize the seeds you have already placed in my hands and have been patiently waiting for me to plant. Teach me to gather during abundance without consuming it all. Teach me to build without needing anyone to see it. Let what I construct in quiet seasons outlast the effort it took to begin it. Let my legacy still be speaking long after my hands have finally rested. In your name, with wisdom as the foundation and faith as the direction I am walking. Amen. Go in peace and build. If these truths have changed the way you look at the work of your hands and the seasons of your life, please subscribe and like the channel. We are unearthing the ancient wisdom that the world has tried to bury. Plant your future today. The next storehouse of knowledge will open soon.